Welcome in, everybody. Christian Jackson here with Peter Ariz of CanesInsight.com. We're going to break down the Miami Hurricanes today. Peter, thanks for joining.
Of course, Christian. Excited to talk about this team. It's been a rough couple years covering and following this team after the Elite Eight, the Final Four. Then you have two awful seasons. So it's been exciting to have a breath of fresh air down here in Coral Gables.
Yeah, I mean, I was a huge fan of what Jim Larrañaga did at Miami, especially the last 2 years. I just loved how many times as underdogs, as an undersized team, as a different team, that they were able to just keep proving people wrong. And Jordan Miller was one of my favorite players. Keyshawn George was one of my favorite players. So while I missed that era, the wheels did fall off, and it was time for something new. So here comes Jay Lucas, leaves Duke before March Madness to come. Duke's defensive coordinator there, gets to Miami with enough time to build a roster. We know the NIL money is there, and finds a few key guys in the portal, 4 vets, and then was able to flip a recruit from Duke. So I want to get into that roster. But first, just tell me about Jay Lucas, what it's been like having him down in Coral Gables and his process in building his staff and the roster.
Yeah, so Coach Lucas from day one, I think it's been about talent acquisition for him and making the identity of this team and this roster on the defensive side of the floor, adding physicality, adding size to the team, because like you said, it was a tough fall off for Miami going from, and all the respect in the world as a huge fan of what Coach Larrañaga built here, but the last couple of years, the roster was not built in a way that had much depth, that had much size across the board, and that hurt Miami once they, quite frankly, before they even got into ACC play last year, they were losing games to teams like Mount St. Mary's, right? So before you even got into the hard ACC play last year, you saw what the issues were. Jay Lucas has been about, like you said, coming in here and bringing in a trio of experienced vets at the point guard position. Trey Donaldson, coming over from Michigan, has also played at Auburn, but he has, a nice pedigree, a nice background to him. Malik Renew coming over from Indiana at the power forward spot, and then Ernest Uday coming over from TCU, former 5-star, started his career at Kansas, a guy who can get up and down the floor, really solid on the defensive side of the floor. So that, from Jay Lucas's perspective, was the trio you bring in that's going to be the core. Then you have to add pieces around that, right? So just going back to your initial question, though, what has he brought? He's brought an energy. He's brought a very Florida flair to the coaching staff. And when I say that, I'm talking about guys like Andrew Moran, who was the head coach at Columbus High School, national champions, who the Boozer twins came out of there. They have a bunch of 5-stars coming out of here the next few years. But he was a guy locally that his name was rings very highly. So he brought him to the staff. Eric Pastrana, a guy came over from Georgia, has worked at the University of Florida as well, but he's a Palm Beach native. Bringing in Russ Springman, a guy that he was familiar with from his time at Texas and was also the former head coach at Oral Roberts. Charlton Young, former Missouri, Florida State assistant, who is from Miami and is a legend in the city here. Very, very highly thought of as a recruiter and a guy who has seen a lot in terms of building relationships and developing these guys. So very Florida local flair. You add that to the fact that we know what Coach Lucas's ties are in the state of Texas, in the Houston area, with the JL3 organization, his family's AAU program, his dad's legacy over there. You're going to see a very Florida and Texas feel to what this roster is going to look like moving forward. But yeah, he's the energy in terms of the hitting the ground recruiting has been awesome to see from, for the fans' perspective. And I think it's paid off as you look at, as this has been a long-winded answer, but you look at, he's now brought in a top 20 recruiting class in a short period of time and a top 20 type transfer portal class. So that's a very quick flip of the roster that you're bringing in a whole new team.
I want to start with the transfers, and I want to start with Malik Reneau, because at Indiana, just a lot of dysfunction there and a little redundant with him and Omar Ballo on the inside. But man, Malik Reneau, he's an old school 4-man, puts the power and power forward, but not going to shoot it for much. 23 minutes a game, 13-6. But man, he is a bully down there. And constantly when I'm watching Indiana, I'm like, this dude is so good. They should be getting him the ball more. So do you expect him to be kind of the feature point of the offense? I know we got some good guards and wings on this team as well. But do you expect this to kind of be a slower tempo, half court kind of offense and kind of feeding the post a bit?
Yeah, I think that's the number one question is where's the outside shooting and outside scoring going to come from on this team? So you start with Malik, and it's going to be interesting because the expectation is that you're going to play him next to Ernest Ude, who he himself is not much of a guy who stretches the floor in terms of shooting. But I think the idea and the word around Miami right now is the big focus around Malik. And I mentioned Andrew Moran, the coach from Columbus. He also is a big time NBA skills development coach. Works with a lot of guys pre-draft. Has worked with Cade Cunningham before the draft. Worked with James Wiseman. So works with like top 5 picks, right? And he works with guys in the offseason as well. So the skills development is something that's been a big emphasis for the staff. With Malik, they believe, hey, if we can get him comfortable with hitting, stretching his range out and becoming a consistent threat from 15 to 18 feet, can stretch the defense out a little bit. You understand he's not going to be, consistently out there jacking up 3-point shots. But if you can get the defense to play him out a little bit more towards the perimeter, that the idea is, and also as I sat down and interviewed strength and conditioning coach Zach Zillner, new strength and conditioning coach, he told me Malik's made big strides in the weight room. He looks more athletic, and just the metrics show that he's added some quickness to his game as well. So I think that aspect on both sides of the floor will help him a lot. But yes, this is going to be a grinded out, pound it team. Trey Donaldson at point guard, we got to talk about him. He's a guy that Miami believes is a big time shot maker. The efficiency, I think you need to see it take a big step up in terms of the shooting percentages from him. But we talk about the physicality of this team. Trey Donaldson is a guy who was a 4-star recruit as a football prospect coming out. He was, and to this point, I'll give you this nugget, was committed to Auburn and played there to play both football and basketball. He always wanted to play basketball, but the coach that he was committed to at that time for football at defensive backs is now the defensive backs coach at Miami. And he actually reached out to Trey Donaldson his first week on campus and tried to get him to play football this year too. So you're talking about your point guard who was he was a safety. He was a hard hitting safety on the back end. So that's who your point guard is. Ernest Ude, who's, like I said, is a big man that Jay Lucas believes can be an all ACC, one of these all ACC teams sort of player, because he can defend at a very high level. He can, like I said, run the floor. He's dropped about 10, 15 pounds, according to Zach Zillner, strength and conditioning coach. So you're going to be rough. You're going to be tough. You talked about Malik Renew, how he can bring that physical aspect to the game. So again, that's your core right there. It's a really solid core if you're starting right there. I think as we'll get into some of these other pieces of the team, that's where it's going to be very interesting to see what they've got there.
Another note on Renault is 2 assists per game. He's not afraid to. Yeah. He's got some pretty good vision for his size and can pass out of doubles. Uday definitely defensive anchor. Offensively, it'll be interesting to see how they can fit alongside each other, but just whether it's the offensive glass or just some passing on the interior. I think it can work though, right? Especially if you're a defensive minded team.
Yeah, it can. I think it's going to come down to, can Malik be a consistent mid-range shooter, right? Because if they're playing, or can they space the floor enough to where they can both be efficient there? I think it'll be very interesting once you get into some of these lineup combos when we talk about some of these other guys. But the interior defense should be much improved, man. I mean, just watching a lot of these games the last couple seasons, it's hard to put kind of a metric on how Miami was just. You can't look at the box score and say, yeah, they got out rebounded today, but like it just was evident watching this team that they did not have guys who were consistently chasing the ball. And again, this all goes back to what Jay Lucas wants the identity of this team to be.
Trey Donaldson said some interesting things about him. I didn't even know the football thing about him at all, but 11-4-4 at Michigan last year. Shot 38% from deep, which is better than I thought. I don't know why, because when you look at the numbers, like he shot like 40% from deep at Auburn. Like he is a good 3-point shooter, but there's just something about when I watch him play, like I don't think that. Maybe it's because he's a good playmaker and he's looking to kind of get downhill, or just the fact that, he's playing 35 minutes a game down the stretch for Michigan. He didn't score more than 13 points in a game, the last month of the season. Like that's another team who was playing two bigs, and it kind of functioned through those two bigs. And when he was able to provide a lift offensively, it meant a lot because he was kind of the table setter for those guys and a tone setter defensively. But do you expect him to kind of be that same kind of guy this year? Or is there an offensive jump in store for him, getting more of the keys to the offense?
So there is an expectation that he's going to be that floor general that you're talking about, that guy who is the lead. He's, to me, from what I've seen, being around a little bit, being in the facility, he's going to be the vocal leader of this team. He's a guy who's not afraid to get in guys' faces and challenge them. But Christian, to what you're saying there's also an expectation that he can add to the game, right? And I kind of see what you're saying. Like, it's not a guy that when it leaves his hand, you're expecting it to go in, right? But that's why I say Miami, talking to people around the program, they believe he's a shot maker, and that a lot of the numbers maybe, with him are a little bit deceiving because they expect the shot selection to be better within the system. They expect just another quick note on him. He was actually taking like online classes his last semester at Michigan. So he was in Miami working out in the pretty much by himself and with his team, whatever you want to call it, in there working out since he pretty much transferred to Miami, months before he was officially a student there. So that, for him to be able to get that extra work in, and there's already, like I said, I call it the expectation, just talking to people around there, that he has expanded his range and I don't want to say expand the range, but make it a more consistent part of his game that where he's really, a knockdown sort of guy.
True Washington coming over from New Mexico, that fourth transfer. I know we got Marcus Allen too to get to as well, but 11 points, 4 boards, 2 assists a game. Also not a great 3-point shooter, playing off Donovan Dent. Can hit threes, can create for himself off the catch and get downhill, good in transition, good defender. How do you see True Washington fitting in alongside Trey Donaldson?
Yeah, good chance he's a starter here for Miami, and he's, the thing I hear about him is they really like him defensively, on ball defense with him, which it is a common theme here. The guy can defend. We will see, his offensive game, how much he's added to it, right? But this just goes back to the fact that you talk about what some of these Miami games could look like. We remember what some of these Virginia teams have looked like, and those are lofty expectations. Those are great teams, right? But I actually use the Leonard Hamilton, Florida State, how some of those teams have looked over the years, man. Just very, very physically gifted teams that kind of just overpower you sometimes. And just talking to some of the guys on the team last year when they played Florida State, and obviously it wasn't even a great Florida State team last year, but it's like sometimes the sheer size and physicality just takes you out of games. And I think Washington, although he's not a huge guy, I think in transition they expect him to be a real threat, and if he can just be more efficient as a shooter, you're expecting all these guys to take leaps. It doesn't always happen, but you're going to need one of these guys to become a real knockdown threat, which I think there's a couple guys who could be that on the roster, and I'm sure we'll talk about them here in a second.
New Mexico is top 20 defense, one of the fastest teams in the country. He's used to playing. It'll be interesting to see tempo-wise, but I meant that more so in terms of him being a threat in transition and just guarding at a high level. Let's talk about these freshmen now. Shelton Henderson, you flip a couple of these like top 35-ish guys. Shelton Henderson flipped recruitment from Duke, and then Dante Allen. I know he's from Montverde, and everyone who goes from Montverde is a good player, basically. So that's all I know about those guys. Tell me what to expect from the 6'6".
So Dante Allen, I'll start with him. And so he played 1 year at Montverde. He's a Miami kid, grew up pretty much his whole life here in Miami. His dad's Malik Allen, who played long time in the NBA as a power forward, as an assistant coach for the Miami Heat. So Dante Allen played at Riviera Prep here in high school before Montverde, won a state championship, and it's a pretty new school, so he led them, showing his leadership ability. Grew up playing AAU ball with the Boozers even through high school, and he is, from everything you hear out of these freshmen, him and Shelton Henderson both. But this is a guy who, I'm not saying it's out of the equation. This guy could start at some point this season. Really nice combo guard, has the size. He's strong physically for a freshman. Gets downhill. really a solid shooter from the outside. I don't know that he's known as like an outside shooter at this point, but in transition, this guy is a load to handle. I mean, when he gets, again, if you see some of the clips of him, he really takes advantage of size mismatches in transition, getting downhill. Really good passer as well. So top 40 recruit. You flip him from Villanova, and the previous staff wasn't, for whatever reason, didn't really have a great relationship, wasn't really prioritizing his recruitment. And as soon as Jay Lucas came in, boom, you get that flip done. And then Shelton Henderson, the connections from Houston there, as he was part of the JL3 Lucas AAU travel ball team, or travel team, whatever you want, whatever the EYBL circuit. I know there's so many different tournaments they play in now, but he grew up very tightly knit with the Lucas family, has put on about 15 pounds of muscle right now. And this is a guy who may be, in a best case scenario for him, obviously would be a one and done guy, but I think could have a couple years of development here at Miami. Big time defender at this point, a guy who can facilitate the game offensively. You want to see him expand his range consistently, but in transition, getting downhill defensively, expect him to be a day one player. Could he be in the mix to be a starter? I think very much so for this team.
That's the top 6. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really know where to go from here, because it's some European guys, a couple SEC transfers, so I didn't see play much. So I'm kind of just gonna let you tell me who the next kind of key guys are from this team.
Yeah, so I know we have a couple more minutes here before we have to wrap things up, but those would be the top 6 on paper. Okay, and Marcus Allen, we didn't talk about him much, but he's another guy, big wing coming over, was a top 60 type recruit coming out of high school, originally from Miami, played at Missouri last year. Big wing is going to bring you a lot of perimeter length and defensive ability. But the one name that I think fans across college basketball need to keep an eye on.
Can I guess?
Go for it.
Is it Malovic?
Timothé Malovich. Timo Malovich, man. I mean, this guy is, and look, I was excited about him when the commitment popped, because the Euros, the overseas guys, so you have a couple other older international guys that Miami brought over. These guys always intrigue me. I think most basketball fans, we can always be excited popping on a Euros tape for the first time and seeing, the sort of competition they're playing and the gyms they're playing and all that. But this is a guy coming over from Mega Basket, same club that Nikola Jovic played in. Many others obviously share. So this guy shares the same agent as Jovic, and there was a tie there. But Malovic at about 6'8", 6'9", is a guy who Slovakian, played with the Slovakian national team this summer and averaged 22.6 points a game, almost 8 rebounds, 44.8% from 3 on 7.3 attempts per game, and 93% from the free throw line on 7 attempts per game. But he was also basically running the offense. He was almost like he was running the show as a point forward for them. So this is a guy coming in at 20 years old. He's one of these older international prospects who Miami expects to have for a couple years here. But I'm telling you, with the shooting ability that this guy brings, he can stretch the floor, can get to the free throw line at a high clip, and shoots it very, very well. Tough shot to defend because it's a high release, and he's, like I said, he's about 6'9". The ceiling is the roof, right? As MJ once said with this guy. He is the potential is all. I mean, this is a guy that Miami believes could be a lottery type pick. Maybe not this year, but a couple years down the line from now. Very excited about him. The 2 other international guys to watch: Noam Dovrat, Israeli point guard, 23 years old, was one time a big time prospect. Before, when I say big time prospect, I mean NBA prospect. Had some injuries that kind of hampered him, and kind of wasn't 100% the last couple of years. They believe he's as close as he's gonna get to being what he once was in terms of the health. 6'5" combo guard, can defend multiple positions. He's someone that can give you some versatility there positionally. And then Saleh Altuntaj, big man from Turkey, who had a really good showing in the under 20, the FIBA under 20 don't know if it was the Euros or which competition it was this summer, but was all tournament team there this summer. So those guys all came in late in terms, like they weren't here in the summer, but all older, 20 years old, 23 years old. That you're bringing in some grown men there, and I know that has been a big thing for Coach Lucas, is bringing that experience to mesh with some of the young guys.
It's going to be interesting. I think we know the identity of this team, where the upside gets unlocked for things to really click in year one is if these freshmen and these European guys can really take them to the next level. So that's some high praise for Malovich, is it?
Malovich, yeah.
Malovich.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have my eyes on him. But there you have it, the Miami Hurricanes. It's a new era in Coral Gables and a young coach with great recruiting ties. Obviously, Shire spoke super highly of him, and he was a key cog in what Duke's been able to do lately. So I think Miami's headed in the right direction. So, Peter, thanks so much for coming on and breaking it down with me.
Christian, thank you so much for having me, man.